thank you to everybody who's taken time out of their day to come hang out with us. We really appreciate it. Natalie's right. This is really about, building a great, intimate community, and it's a moment for you all to get to know us and each other. So please do, stay on camera and feel free to unmute and just be part of the convo. This is by no means meant to be a one-way conversation. So I am Champ. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Capsule. I have to say that I am extremely excited about today's conversation. I am very lucky in that I get to spend virtually every day of my life talking to really smart creative leaders. And I had the pre-call with Andrei, was it yesterday? 2 days ago? And we chatted for a few minutes, and I was just blown away by all the good nuggets that I heard from Andrei. And so very, very excited that he's here with us today. If you are interested in video and how to scale it, Andrei is the guy. So really, really psyched to have you here, Andrei. Let me just quickly introduce you. Andrei is a creative and video leader with over 16 years of experience in building and scaling video programs at companies like Shopify, Dayforce, and now Kaseya. His work is focused on helping organizations move from asking whether they should do video at all to scaling it across entire teams and organizations, all without losing quality or brand guidelines. So really excited to have you here, Andrei.
Really?
The first thing I wanted to get into is really more of a macro topic on video, particularly as it relates to the enterprise. So not long ago, 5 years ago, most enterprises thought about video as something that you would do, once a quarter, maybe once a month, and, you'd hire an agency to go do it. And now you fast forward just a little bit, and it's just incredible how video is being woven in to every part of the organization, from sales to marketing to comms to paid media to virtually every department seems to have an insatiable appetite for video. So I'm just curious, kind of what your take on where we are in the world of video today, particularly as it relates to enterprise.
Yeah, it's been a pretty neat journey. And like you mentioned, like 5 years ago, there was a big shift, right? We were all in the middle of a pandemic. And I think one of the biggest shifts for our content medium was the fact that we started seeing into people's houses, we started seeing into people's homes, we started seeing into people's personal lives. And what was neat about that is we wanted to connect with them, right? So whereas historically, enterprise organizations and generally companies, in general, were making high production value, high quality commercials and other types of videos, that production value was recognized as not really being necessary anymore. And it's really interesting to see how that shift, how basically companies jumped on board. It's almost like how TikTok was doing their dance videos and companies are like, how do we get to be part of that? I'm like, I'm not making dance videos. But the reality was suddenly user-generated content, webcam style content, and just content that gave a glimpse into people's lives became the norm, right? Before, everybody wanted to watch video, and afterwards, everybody wanted to make video. So it's been a massive, massive shift. I think truly the pandemic accelerated things astronomically. But I mean, the neat thing is like, I like to check the stats every once in a while, just, how video as a medium stacks up against others. And I remember looking many, many moons ago, what was the cost per click? And cost per click was like 2 cents for video for awareness on YouTube. And what was really cool is when I actually just recently searched that, it's half that. It's 1 cent, right? And while that doesn't sound like a big shift, it's a big shift at scale. And what I thought was neat about that was I remember having conversations, 10 years ago, where they're talking about video being 2 cents per click, but a video costs $100,000 to make. But nowadays, video doesn't cost anything if you make certain types of content, and now you can distribute it at scale. So it's really become just a medium that's a powerhouse. And when we talk about cost per click, the number sounds interesting, but when you compare it to other types of mediums, video is by far the cheapest. So all of a sudden you have a medium that's emotive. You have a medium that resonates with the audience, a video that engages audience, a video that really incites conversations, and also a medium that is known to produce the highest brand recall. And it's one of the cheapest forms of content to produce now. So it really is incredible.
Well, you've spent a lot of time at some really incredible companies and helped them scale video. What has that journey looked like for you? You know, it sounds like your kind of thing is coming in when people are like, hey, we're thinking about video. How do we not only do it from a brand perspective and that kind of like, you know, tier one high production value content, but then how do we use that to anchor a much larger strategy to become almost like a video first company?
Yeah. And, you know, it really is interesting when you get into organizations and they want to start making video. A lot of companies will come out of the woodwork and say, hey, this is what we want to make. And I remember when I was at the agency, and excuse me for 1 second, actually, funny enough, somehow my dog just actually opened my door and I've just had 2 dogs and a cat walk into the room and they've decided to start fighting. So give me exactly 10 seconds.
We're live. That's what happens. Especially it's funny because it's funny because this is exactly what happens at COVID when we were all sitting in our home offices trying to have conversations with each other.
Can't make this up.
No, you cannot. Hopefully he comes back and the dog and cat have survived. Okay, good.
They are alive, but they haven't rolled out of the door though. So, you know, it's that classic video of that newscaster with his wife when that kid ran, and that just happened to me.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah. So going back to that, it's like when you join organizations, what was really neat was I remember in my agency days, I came on board and I went, I'm going to make the coolest stuff. Right. And I was so excited. And then when I joined Ceridian, I went, I'm going to make the coolest stuff. And I was a video production manager there when I joined. I said the exact same thing when I joined Shopify. And then when I joined Kaseya, I went, if I start the same way that I have at my previous organizations or roles, I'm going to run into the exact same headaches. I'm going to run into the exact same results. I'm going to see the same pattern. And I went, okay, so instead of I'm going to make the coolest stuff, I started thinking, I'm going to show you guys how to make the coolest stuff. And that's where the mindset shift happened. So what was interesting was when you walk into these organizations, you have people across the organization, head of creatives, VPs of go-to-market, everybody's telling you what they need, right? And you kind of have to shift your mindset and say, I can hear the ask. I can understand where you're trying to get to. Let me tell you how you need to do it. And I think that's the biggest shift from being a video production manager to someone who's working in video marketing.
And I guess like what drove that for you? Like why did you decide to kind of shift your thinking from I'm just going to be the maker to kind of this enabler role? Was it, well, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And it really was this idea of making versus enabling, right? Making has a finite amount of impact, but enabling is exponential. And it's really interesting because when you make, you can only make as much as you can make. And then you can hire someone and they can make as much as they can make. And maybe they're faster than you or slower than you. So they make a set amount, right? But what I started thinking was, I need to take a bit of an executive approach to this. I need to look at this as running my own business, right? And just as an example, CEOs, for example, they're enablers, right? They provide the playing field for their employees to develop the company within their own specialties. Well, what's neat is that really sounds like, a video production manager who can develop the company within their specialty. And, I was thinking CEOs don't tend to write blogs. They don't shoot and edit video, and they don't sit in on every sales meeting, right? And in addition to that, just taking it away from our areas, they're not sitting with the CFO looking over their shoulder at numbers. they've really let their teams run to grow the company, and they provide the direction. So what CEOs are out to do are make sure that the teams have the tools to do what they need. So why can't we do that as video professionals, as creatives? Why can't we provide that playing field for other teams to create the content? And, just as an example, I started thinking back on, my old days, but when I was at the agency, I found producers could do about 9 to 11 projects at the same time. And when I went into corporate, that number drastically dropped to about 3 to 5. And I really dove into that process. I wanted to understand why agency producers who were coming into the corporate world, right, who were going client side, suddenly became less effective. And what was interesting was like the same projects, the same work, but the projects became high touch. And that's what slowed people down, right? At the agency, basically projects are brought to you and you're there to execute. In the corporate world, you're in it from the tactic phase. So, I think every single person who's made a video on this call has probably heard, and I wrote this down actually, I went, that's a really great video, but it would be even better if you could focus it on X topic. Or that ad is really awesome. What would make it better if it said X copy? Can you? And I really started thinking, well, why can't you? Right? I can't do everything. My team has a finite amount of time. And so taking that CEO approach that I mentioned, I threw away the production process, right? What if you could change things where video teams actually went in and built the playing field for the other teams to play within, right? What if we outline the types of videos that the company would produce, source the tools that are best suited for the task, and then provided the direction while they created the content? I think we are at a point with tools on the market, that allow us to enable other teams and set up the guardrails that are needed so that the content coming out of these other teams is at a quality that's expected by the organization.
That's amazing. I think this concept of the playing field and sort of creating frameworks for people to create outside of the organization is a theme that I'm increasingly hearing about. And I think particularly as it relates to what's happening with AI. There's just every day some new video tool, and teams are out, like non-creative teams are out looking at these tools. They're sharing them. They're like, wow, I can do this to help me sell better or educate my customers better or do whatever. And yet they're doing that in this sort of chaotic way, which brings back to, well, what is the responsibility of the creative team and especially the creative leader in a world where actually everyone is a creator? Every salesperson is a creator. Every marketer is a creator. And by extension, in some ways, those people are part of the creative team now, all of a sudden. And it sounds like you've sort of just accepted and adopted that role for yourself, that you were sort of the conductor of that broader creative team organization, rather than the maker of just, the assets that you're told to make and the team that you directly manage.
Yeah. And also taken back from what you just asked previously as well, I remember consulting with a company, an up and coming tech company, and they were really excited to get into video. And they were asking me all these questions about how to make this, how do I do that? What is the best medium for distribution? Just all the questions that honestly anybody on this call would ask. And I went, okay, we got to pause for a second. I go, what works for your company? What audience signals have you seen as far as content that works for your teams? What are you experimenting with? They wanted to do everything. And I get it. It's exciting. Video is exciting, right? It's limitless possibilities. But they couldn't answer that question. And I think that's the first thing that I do when I talk to video professionals and when I talk to marketing professionals. I ask them, what type of content resonates with your audiences? And the interesting thing is, the most common answer I get is, we have a really strong product video that we made. And I go, cool, that's fantastic. How many? And they go, well, one. And I go, what did you compare it against? And they go, a webinar. And I go, cool. So you're comparing apples and squirrels, right? Like, they're very different things. Like, squirrels are much more nimble than apples, at least in my experience. So, but that metric is a little silly, but that's literally what I hear when I hear stuff like this. So when you come to an organization and you go, what should we make? Not what can I make, or not I can make the coolest thing, but what should we make? One of the best sources for information you could pull from is written copy, right? What's resonating with your audiences? If you don't have the video information, find the audience signals elsewhere. If you know your audience is geeking out on really technical blogs, you're about to do deep dive demo videos for your first round of video content, right? If your audience is really resonating with case study stories, you're about to go down the route of customer stories and testimonial style videos. If you have a product-led organization where it really is all about feature releases, you're diving into product sizzles, right? But what you need to do, and I think the biggest shift in mindset, is not what can I make, but what are our audiences telling us?
So if I'm hearing you right, kind of like blank canvas for teams today is, if you're really not doing video, maybe you made one or two and you're still kind of in the old world of like, we do a video a quarter. The best way to start is look at other content types that are already resonating and figure out what the video version of that is and start making that today.
100%.
And then from there, and then do you see that that's the role of this kind of new creative team, this new creative organization, right? It's more of this kind of like, how do we create formats and experiment and figure out what works and then figure it how to scale? Like, how do you think about beyond that? Okay, you've got your one or two content types. Great, these work. Now, how do we make 1,000 of them this year, whatever the number is?
Yeah. So, but it's exactly that. Test, iterate, try again, repeat. Right. What's interesting is the old mindset used to be, if you make a bad video, it'll explode the company. Well, if you actually think about that mindset, go back to when social media first got released. And yes, I'm saying I'm old, right? But back in the day, they used to do webinars weekly from HR, where they talked about what you could and couldn't post on social. And they were so involved with employees' social lives and making sure that we were all marching within the same line. And I think that fear has been transplanted into video, right? Where something that was so difficult to make is now simple. And it's the same thing with social. An official statement, a PR statement was so hard to launch from a company, but you could just post it to Twitter or X now. So what my reco would be, go out, play, test, iterate, see what works. The thing about bad video today, provided, you're not putting in like legally incorrect information, is it just doesn't land. And guess what?
Right.
That's an audience signal, right? Goes away, it just disappears. And that's one of your audience signals. So when somebody says, we should do that video, and you're like, I did, nobody watched it. That's a great audience signal. And, when you're thinking about how to scale, there's a bunch of ways to do it. And it really is dependent on the content type that you choose to go down. And whether that's using tools, for example, if you work in e-com, when I saw your team's variant tool, my reaction when I saw that, and I'm sorry for the plug guys, it's not a paid plug. I saw the app. I came from Shopify. I saw this, and I literally was on the call. And this is, I still remember. I went, "Oh, so much wasted time!" Right where I'm just remembering not hours, not dozens, hundreds of hours, right? A Shopify campaign was 1,400 plus assets. And if you're an enterprise and you're not testing and iterating ads, for example, then what are you doing, right? But you need the ability to do it. It shouldn't be hard for you to get them. And that's where when you start to use the right tools for the role, suddenly, as an example, if you're an e-com, just imagine the number of ads you could output. And that's one tool. So the possibilities are out there.
On this idea of video being historically this really precious asset that there'd be 30 people involved in making every video, and now it's anybody can do it. How do you recommend an organization kind of flip that mindset? You mentioned this idea that's kind of just start testing and iterating. We have this concept that we talk about at Capsule called, you've heard of MVPs for products, where it's minimum viable product.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about minimum viable video. What is the version of this video that you can put out into the world that people could see and react to, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, and then you kind of iterate from there. But I'm curious I'm curious about the people on this call who are hearing this, and maybe they're agreeing or disagreeing. But from a organizational point of view, how as a creative leader do you kind of get buy-in from leadership on that approach, especially from maybe CMO, old school CMOs or brand leaders who are everything that's got to go out has got to be dialed to the exact pixel and easing curve?
Yeah, it's a great question. And maybe I can say I've had very progressive CMOs, and I've had progressive leaders. But what you can also do to ensure that you're not getting caught in a quality trap or quality feedback loop is you still are making your brand videos. You still are making your high production quality videos. You're still making those pivotal anchor or temple assets. But what's interesting is open this up to teams with guardrails, either inside of the applications that you're utilizing or with content that you know is safe, right? So one of the first things I'd say is the idea of poor quality video nowadays is you left the lens cap on, right? I'm looking through all of our Zoom windows here, and we're all in, our bedrooms, we're all in living rooms, we're all in offices, and it's perfectly acceptable to talk to people in this format. What I would say is by being able to democratize video with apps that have been previously set up, to have guardrails that are developed by the video team, right? Whether they're creative, whether they're content guardrails, right? So it's pulling from specific content, allows you to let the other teams build exponentially inside of those applications, while also letting you have your time back to focus on the big brand moments. So it is a win-win.
Yeah, that's incredible, right? Because then you kind of get both. And I suspect that every creative leader, I get to talk to CMOs, and they are in a frustrated place, right? Because they're feels like the very resource constrained across most companies today. And yet every creative team's being asked to do a lot more. And so what you're saying is the way to do more is not to go hire more people, but rather to kind of take advantage of the storytellers in your organization that already exist, but don't have a medium to actually tell those stories with video specifically.
100%. And if you think of a role as a video production manager or a creative making video, what are the first people you call, for example, are your PMMs? Right? Talk to me about the product. Tell me about the product. What's the most current messaging? What's some of the benefits? What are the pain points that are alleviated? These are all conversations that you will have with an expert on the product. Why can't that person make a video? All right. They are owning the messaging. And again, going back to the example I gave for social, if you actually think about it, back in the day, it still kills me the number of meetings that I sat in from HR about social. So what we had, human resources teaching about social. But what happens nowadays in any enterprise you join, they turn around and say, here's our social playbook, right? Here's our tone. Here's words that describe the brand. Here's the framework that if you want to post something, you can post. Do you think CMOs are reading every tweet? Right? They're not watching every YouTube short. So, and that's the reality of it too. They're not watching the Instagram posts. Again, they're focused on the big moments. And I think once you move past the fact that, when, this is going to be a weird analogy, but it just popped into mind. You and I hop in a Honda Civic, we're going for a drive. You and I hop in a Ferrari, we are being very careful as we enter the vehicle, right? And the reason why I say that is people are treating video like Ferraris. Treat it like it is. Right now, we're in the Honda Civic territory with the occasional Ferrari being thrown out by the brand. And if you don't treat it as something that is a key anchor metric, right? It's just part of the program, then it's just another asset. But in the meantime, it has all the benefits that video actually has.
Can you give an example of either something that you've done or seen out in the wild? I love the Honda Civic analogy. I'm definitely going to steal that. Can you give an example that you've seen or maybe even implemented yourself where this philosophy of minimum viable video, testing, iterating, scaling has worked really well?
Yeah, actually. So in my time at Shopify, I ran a team that was called Learn with Shopify. And Learn with Shopify was Shopify's education channel. And I see someone named Ali on the call, so I'm being very careful how I phrase this. But it was Shopify's channel to really educate our customers on trends in the market. At its simplest form, that was it. What we did initially was just web recordings like this with presentations. And they really started to resonate. So we took away things we increased the production value, right? We realized people liked this. Yeah, it wasn't your channel, but that's really cool. We realized people liked this, so we started to have higher production value shoots. We started to use different style content. And what was interesting about it was we weren't pushing the corporate narrative. That was probably the most unique thing about the channel. Everything in that channel revolves around e-commerce. But it was never buy this Shopify product to do this faster, right? It was just, how do you make money on Facebook? This is how. How do you make money on Instagram? This is how. This is how you drop ship. And what we did was we were listening to our audiences, right? We were listening to the signals we were receiving. We were watching the videos that they were watching, that we were watching what was resonating with them on our channel. We were seeing what they were checking on our competitor pages. We were pulling from written content. It was a huge SEO partnership. And what's neat about that channel is it overtook the core Shopify YouTube channel while I was there. And all of a sudden, everybody and their uncle paid attention, right? Everybody in the organization just went, what just happened? And everybody wanted to be part of that channel. And we didn't change the production value. We didn't change a thing. We had massive outside influences that were really pushing to skew this towards the PMM through line, towards DG initiatives. And we kept it true. And it allowed us to drive the leads that that department was tasked with generating. So that was from testing and iterating, right? And again, it started with the equivalent, if I had to say, somebody with a great webcam sitting by a bright window talking about an interesting topic.
That's great. Anything that I missed that I should ask you? Otherwise, I think it would be great to just open it up to, we have such a good crew here today, so we'd love to hear some audience questions too.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out one thing. I want to talk about probably one of the most painful moments in my career. It's kind of important for people to know where I've come from. So one of the things that I tend to do is speak the language of the business. And I think this is probably the most important thing for video professionals, because we are going to the business and asking for money. And what's interesting about video professionals inside of the enterprise space, people turn around and they think that they're just producers, but they're not. They're already different, right? They've joined an organization that has constraints, that has specific messaging and narratives, and decided to unlock and uncover this puzzle creatively. Well, we need to do that from a marketing perspective and an impact perspective as well, right? It's not about making. And a great story about this is like when I first jumped ship from agency to client side and joined Ceridian, I was in a QBR. It was my very first QBR. I was super excited. And I remember sitting in this QBR hearing all different types of acronyms, CPC, CPL, GTM plans, every acronym you could think of, and all of them were like Spanish to me, right? And everybody was talking about revenue generated. And what ended up happening was I got up to present my part, and I was talking about like likes, views, and shares. And, bless her soul, Christina Cleary, the CMO, she was lovely and, really stayed engaged. But what that meeting taught me was you can't pay the rent with passion, right? You can't pay your department's expenses with likes. You're a CapEx drain at that point. And what you want to actually be is a revenue generation machine. So when you scale, when you look for ways to really have other teams do your job for you, right? They're creating content, they're putting it out into your systems, they're generating, revenue with video, and you're getting credited for that. That's a lot more interesting than being scared of, a potential flub in a line, somebody coughing while they're talking. Who cares, right? Get that impact and be able to speak the language of the business so that you can turn around and say, look what video has done over the last year. And when you've scaled that, that's where the really cool stuff starts to happen, right? That's where when you want to, for example, get into brand videos, when you want to go down the route of, more expensive projects or global initiatives, you get the green light because what you're doing to that point works.
How did you make that leap? Because we talked with so many creative leaders. Many folks went to art school or film school, and they don't like to actually talk too much about the business. You seem to have figured out how to connect those two things. What did you tactically do to kind of learn that language of the business to be able to justify, that your budget and your own job in some ways, right? And I think there's increasing pressure. Like a lot of CMOs or CEOs are sending, links to Runway to creative teams, and they're saying, do we even need a video team anymore, right? So I think maybe what you just said is probably one of the most important things for creative leaders to learn in this kind of new world. And I'm just really curious what your kind of path to that was specifically.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say driven by fear, which I guess I'll explain. I started in film and television production. I was in the Canadian film industry for a hot minute, realized I didn't love it. And I wanted to take those skills and the talented people that I saw corporate, and I jumped into the agency world. And when I moved from agency, I wanted to move from doing to understanding why, right? Why are companies requesting this video? What metrics are they looking at? Because you don't see that in the agency world unless you're doing their go-to-market plan, right? And distributing all the content. So when I joined Ceridian, I remember thinking to myself, especially after this QBR, I think it was around the time of this QBR. It's burned into my memory. I still remember who was presenting that day too. I went to myself, I'm like, I'm going to teach them good video and they're going to teach me good marketing. And what I've looked at inside of organizations, or what I've used inside of organizations, are educational bursaries, right? So I actually got my graduate certificate in marketing, and I'm going forward, I'm actually getting my master's. So what this has allowed me to do is when you're sitting in a meeting and somebody's saying, well, this is working pretty well, I could say, well, this is working even better, right? I understand your initiative. I understand your path. I understand the funnel that you're trying to build. I know what you're saying. And what's really cool about that from a video person perspective is when you understand that world, they don't understand yours, right? Because it's so large, so overwhelming, so technical, so creative. It's everything. And now you speak two languages. So knowing that you can sit with a CMO and say, hey, I want to generate this next year, right? Like I was actually just yesterday talking with my VP. I'm like, year one at my current role, I was all about working to streamline production processes. Year 2, you're going to hear nothing else other than impact. Right? It's all metrics going forward. So that's what they need to kick up the chain. You're enabling your leaders who get you the fund to speak the language they need to get you more funding, more money for productions.
That's awesome. And I had a similar path in my career too. I mean, I didn't really know that much about business, and found that in order to be my most creative and effective self, I had to learn that, because that's where you get scale. And actually there's a lot of power in learning how to sort of not just be the individual creator yourself, but also the one who's kind of orchestrating creation at scale. And I think in order to do that well, you have to do exactly the path that you just went down, which is understand the basics of the business and how you can drive value to the company to earn the resources to go have fun and be creative.
100%.
All right. This was awesome. Would love to open it up. Natalie, you want to take over and MC us with some questions?
Yeah, real quick, you may be seeing a poll up on your screen. If you didn't have a chance to answer those questions, do that. Oh, wait, okay, the poll is closed. Never mind. But maybe you can see the results. But I thought it'd be fun to just kind of talk through those results and see kind of some common threads. So the first question was, how's video currently produced inside your organization? About half said a mix of centralized and distributed teams, some mostly centralized, and then fewer mostly decentralized. Second one, what's the biggest challenge when trying to scale video? Majority said maintaining brand and creative quality. That's definitely something we hear all the time. And then split between not enough internal production capacity, proving business impact, too many tools and workflows. And then the last one, over the next 2 years, what will matter most for scaling video? Split between better tools and production workflows and empowering more teams to create video. Super interesting. Thank you for everyone who participated in those. I think a lot of echoes in terms of the themes that Andrei was sharing about. I wanted to ask one question to start us off, and then I know we've got a couple in the chat, and please continue to drop stuff in the chat. You can also raise your hand, encourage you to ask your questions off of mute. But Andrei, I loved what you said about, I'm going to teach them good video and they're going to teach me good marketing. Like, do you have why do you think that relationship between your team and the stakeholder teams is so important? And how do you maybe say a little bit more about how you get to that place? Because there's always going to be those two stakeholders of like video team and kind of basically the requester or like the person who needs video. So how do you build good relationships so that it's effective for everyone?
Yeah, and what's really interesting about that question is it happens, believe it or not, in your first couple months of joining an org. You know, when you're meeting people, I don't walk into those meetings saying, hey, guess what, paid team, your paid social team, I'm going to make you the coolest content you've ever seen, right? You're going to be able to throw so much money behind this. And they just go, yeah, okay, crazy. But when you walk out that meeting and you go, so what problems are you experiencing? All right. And they tell you engagement, or they tell you, pick any problem, right? It really doesn't matter which one. Video solves just about everything. And take that information, come up with a plan that helps them. Come up with something that you can provide that would help impact their roles. And, as an example, we are filling, we're working to build a program at Kaseya around thought leadership. And originally we were thinking about doing it weekly. Resources forced us to try to do it monthly, which is not ideal for social or any online platform. And then we found a way to do it weekly with shorts. All right. So basically, it's like 250 pieces plus of content every year. First launch is social. All right. They're using our project and our output so that they can bump their metrics. Yes, we're going to put it on YouTube, but I'm giving them the W first, right? And when you can solve other teams' problems, you establish great relationships.
I totally agree with that. I love that. Okay, first question from the audience from Curtis. Curtis, do you want to come off mute and ask it live? I think you're still on.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Hey, everyone. So my organization is big. It's like 25,000 plus people. And with the democratization of AI, it's both a blessing and a curse, because more often than not, I see someone's content. It's like, look at this awesome video I made. And while I certainly appreciate the energy, it meets no brand standards. It is, it's AI slop. So as fortunately, we have a video marketing platform like Vidyard. So I do have the keys to the brand channel. But what is that balance between advocating for people's best intentions, that spirit, without feeling like they're being locked into brand cuffs? And there's some push and pull there. And have you ever encountered that? And how do you balance that without like a firm no? And for me, it's a lot of like, let's collaborate on the next one. I want to capture this energy. But I guess, yeah, that's sort of a broad question. But yeah, just curious about your experience with that.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I love the pulling the keys analogy. I used to think that way too. I still think that way at times, because you, in some instances, are the last line of defense for official content going out. But on the flip side, 25,000 person organization, everybody and their uncle who thinks they can make a video, you might be a bit of a blocker, right? Where people are putting things, you probably have content sitting in your inbox where people want you to review it or post it for days, right? You don't have time for that. And the reason why I say that is because I'm telling you from my experience, I don't have time for that, right? So AI slop is exactly that. But when I start those conversations, believe it or not, I start it with like exactly this. Oh my God, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. What tool did you use? And they go like this. And interestingly enough, one of the pieces I try to fish out of them, I ask this every time, how long did that take you? Because somebody might have cracked. There are so many tools out now, man, that like, if somebody actually gets a tool that you haven't heard about, which is very possible, and has cracked a code, it's good to have that information, right? And then I typically follow that up with one of two things. Great tool that you used, great video, I got something better for you, let's talk about this. Or two, and this is one of my favorite go-tos, I hope nobody from our organization is paying attention. I'm like, love the video you made. Believe it or not, we have something launching in the next few weeks just like this. It conflicts with some messaging coming down the pipeline. So I'm going to ask you to hold off on that for now. All right. So those are two very nice dodging statements that you can utilize. But what I'm getting at though is, I'm helping you deflect there. But what that also lets you see is what tools are they using? Right. And really let them, they're experimenting and iterating. Love the energy. Please bring me that. Right. And then in addition to that, what type of content are they creating? Because dependent on the platform they might have made true AI slop, where they're in Gemini and they're like, look, a flying flamingo has just picked up a dinosaur and it sold their product. And it's like, what did you just do? Right? And versus they might actually have a desperate need for demo videos. And that'll be a bit of a signaler for you. It's kind of like smoke in the distance. It definitely shows that there's a fire. Right? And what's cool is that actually lets you go down the route of, and I've done this with teams internally. Hey, you know what? You guys would benefit from X tool. Let's get you an account. And my team happens to get an account with that as well at no cost to my team, right? Because they're paying for it and they're happily on it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Andrei, are you feeling pressure on your team to use AI in certain ways? Would love to hear. We actually haven't talked a ton about AI, actually, which is a bit of a miracle in our initial conversation. But I'm curious, just like, generally your take, and if you're feeling pressure to use AI and how you're using it within your own workflows.
So, great question. I'll tell you about my time at Shopify. If you actually Google Toby Lutke and his, I think it's his manifesto on AI, he have a very long tweet about this. When I joined Shopify, my first year there, we really were in just typical production. Then all of a sudden AI took hold, right? And what was interesting about at least my experience at Shopify was I was told, here's the credit card. Don't put in any private company information. Don't put in PII. Go forth and do whatever you want. Just report back to us weekly. And that didn't feel like a suggestion. I'll be completely clear. It felt like a forceful go experiment and show us what you're doing. So when you talk about, is there pressure? Yes, right? What companies are looking at is maximum revenue generation per employee, simply put. And if you actually start to think about it that way, right, then you can start to appease the masses. And so, as an example, in my current role, we don't use AI as much as we use at Shopify. I'd like to use it more, but I do use it to accelerate processes. I use it when we're making customer stories. I use it when, I provide transcripts to teams and they go, hey, well, what's in? I don't know. Drop it into ChatGPT and ask it the questions. You don't need me, right? Like, sorry, that sounded so condescending. I felt all the feels in that moment. But the reality is like my team, and I'm kind of going back to the second, the third one here. Over the next 2 years, what will matter most for scaling video? I think it's empowering more teams to create video, right? Because if we're thinking better tools and production workflows, we're thinking, how can we make more? And yes, some tools need to be lifted. I get it. But I'm not giving a rookie Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Premiere, right? But on the flip side, if your video professionals that know how to tell video stories are thinking about ways of executing content, building out formats, building out templates, building out guardrails, basically doing what they're experts at, and then letting other teams play within that, I think really it's empowering more teams to create video. That's really critical, and AI will let you do that. Not so much Gen AI at the moment, but in the future. I mean, if you want me to keep talking on this topic, I could do another hour and a half, but I
love it.
I'm trying to sum it up.
I mean, we built our whole company around the thesis that you just laid out. And so obviously big believers in that, and the technology continues to improve. And I agree with you. I think we're not far from a world where any storyteller inside the organization will be able to tell their story. And you made a really good point earlier, which is that oftentimes it's not the creative team that knows how to tell that story the best. It is the person that's closest to the customer or the product or the sale or whatever it is. They're there, they're experiencing it. They know the thing that's going to land for that particular moment in time and that particular customer who's looking at that particular piece of content. Empowering them, I think, will be it will be a real way for businesses to grow in the future, as opposed to this, one-off thing that we do every once in a while. So
100%. And to add to that, Champ, I would say, believe it or not, I think that the people closest to the product, to the sales reps, or to the customer, sorry, the sales reps, the BDRs, the SDRs, all of them, they understand the narrative the best.
Yeah.
They don't know how to tell the story. And that's where we come in. Right. And again, we're blending that blue sky daydreaming with creative prowess and technical abilities. Video professionals are really important assets to any organization.
I think that, to me, the precedent that confirms that this is an almost inevitable thing, it is going to happen one way or another, is if you look back, you referenced the early days of social media. Well, it used to be kind of crazy to think that, when Vine came out or when Instagram launched video, that somehow everybody was going to be a video creator. And yet that's exactly what happened. The tools and the access and the barrier to entry became low enough that everybody could tell their own story without any technical expertise. And I think that's exactly what's going to play out in the world of enterprise video. The only difference is that there's this constraint around brand. And so if we can solve that, if the creative team can become sort of the brand context or the brand, what did you say? You called it the playing field. then that same wave of content creation will take place on the larger brand and enterprise side, just as it did in the consumer world.
Yeah, 100%.
I got a question. So how about adoption? Because I ran an in-house team. We wanted to help the marketers, the social media team. We came up with solutions for them, all different kinds of tools and things like that. They tended to look at those tools like, say, Adobe Rush or whatever, or even like a tool like this. And they were like, oh, that's great. And why don't you use it? And my people would use After Effects and Premiere. So how do you push towards adoption? Because that's the key. You can put something in place, but if no one's actually using it, it just sort of dies on the vine, and all that work that you put in and all that research is, unsuccessful.
100%. So I've done two ways. One was friendlier than the other. Both were effective. I'll tell you both. So when I was at Ceridian, we brought in Vidyard, and we were using what was at the time called Go Video. It's now called Vidyard Messages. And we wanted to improve outreach. We wanted to improve customer communication. So outreach for the BDRs, customer communication resolution as far as the help desk went, and then general warm handoffs between reps and just, putting a human face in front of people. So there were metrics tied to it. And I put together a 15-person dream team of what I'd call internal influencers. And I went, let's do this, guys. Over the next 6 weeks, you're all going to make videos, and, it's going to be brilliant, right? I had researched this tool. I had gone into this tool. I had done everything I needed to get this tool onboarded. And it, excuse the language, but it fucking failed. Nobody made a video. Nothing happened. I even, in my hubris, went up to the, senior leadership team. I'm like, you just wait to see what happens next, right? And I realized, first thing was I approached it wrong. I told them what to do, and they didn't understand what to do. Because one of the most common things I heard from the reps, one of the most common pieces of feedback I got was, well, what am I supposed to say? I'm like, well, you guys don't stop talking. So just be yourselves, right? The sales rep, they don't stop talking. So just to accelerate that story, and what we ended up doing there is we gamified it, right? We went to specific teams and we gamified it. We went, hey, person who makes the most videos this week, $100 gift card. Person who closes an account or has the most watches this week, $200 gift card. Person who closes an account with an attributed video to that account, $500 gift card. This is in addition to anything else that they were pulling in. So that was the first way, right? That's the fun way. People loved that. 700 people got on board, right? It was wild. We went from, as an internal team, I remember the metric yesterday. We went from, as an internal team, making and launching 120 videos a year to having a source of 11,300 videos a year at its peak, right? I didn't do that. Well, I did that. I enabled it, but I didn't make those videos. I couldn't. Not enough time in the day. So that was the first way. Second way, I found a tool. There was a need at another organization for a lot of editing. And I recognized that I didn't have the talent on my team, the ability to hire at that moment. And we were running like a ticket-based organization. We were basically an internal agency focused on tickets with an SLA of 30 to 45 days. And for anybody that's made video on this call, have you ever heard of an SLA being 30 to 45 days? That's insane, right? Wild. And it didn't matter what type of video. The ticket was submitted 30 to 45 days, you had a video. Well, you can imagine the first thing that gave was quality, right? Day 2 at this role, I stopped that. I threw the ticket system away. It caused a lot of pandemonium, right? But I was so against taking tickets. And then what I did was I brought on an editing service that provided unlimited editing. That was super simple to use, super simple to request. And believe it or not, had a faster turnaround than my team was previously doing, right? My team was like, hey, 30 to 45 days for a video. I was like, hey, submit that webinar. You want it chopped down? You get it back in 48 hours. The second people heard that, they bought into it. And then they tried working with it. And unfortunately, it was, the reason why I call it a bit of a painful process is because I had to really put my foot down and say, I need you guys to help yourselves because I've set up the brand guidelines in the system. I've briefed our our CSM. They're very aware of our needs and requirements and what my expectations for output are. I just need you guys to actually use the tool. So either you use the tool or you don't get help, because I can help you if you help yourself. And I think it was about 6 weeks. So adoption in that case was way faster. I have 40 plus people across, I think, 11 teams using this tool now for editing. My team hasn't seen a webinar to cut down, which no video team should be handling, in over almost a year. And this has let us integrate with other marketing teams while they're getting assets created that they require, right? Imagine we were doing ads at scale. I'd be all over variants and saying, all right, you guys go in, make your ads in here. You don't need me. Maybe we set up the first one, right? Or maybe there's a template that we pull from, or, I get the design team involved. But at some point, they're adults. They need to start helping themselves in their metrics. And what you can also do is a bit of influence. Speak to other leaders and ensure that video is a metric inside of their goals or KPIs. Right? So now, that's a third approach. You're forcing a top-down approach of you will do this. Eventually, it just becomes commonplace. People just did it. That's what happened at Ceridian, right? When I brought on that tool, I think the initial adoption was 350 people. Then as new people were onboarded into the company, it went up to 500, and then other teams came on board because they saw the success of all the other teams. Right? I didn't train those extra 150 people. It was a self-fulfilling system. So pick your path based on your personality type and go for it.
Amazing. We are at time. I want to thank you, Andrei, for sharing so much of your insight and perspective and experience with everyone here. I want to thank everyone who participated in any way, asking questions, responding to the poll in the chat. I've learned a ton. We have a survey in the chat if you are willing to just take 1 minute to share what you thought about the event. We host these virtual events with different creative leaders every single month. Next month, we will have the woman who behind the Salesforce mascot and several other mascots. We'll be talking about brand and culture. But we would love to have you at future events. And in the meantime, we will. I hope you all have a great day and great rest of your week. Thanks everyone for coming.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Andrei. Thanks, everybody. Take care.